For our COBT friends, it's Maynard, Mike, and Brett here with something really special. In fact, it's a special edition. I want to welcome Jimmy Glotfelty. Jimmy is on the Public Utility Commission in Texas. He was appointed by the governor in 2021. He's got a long career in energy policy, energy business. He's got a lot to talk about today. But in particular, one of the things we're lucky to have him talk about is recently Governor Abbott put him in charge of a committee really to come back and tell the governor, how do we make nuclear a reality in Texas? So he's going to tell us all about it. He's a longtime friend, and as I say, a longtime participant in the energy markets and energy policy. Jimmy, we're delighted to have you.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, and this is a real unique moment. Brett's over in Charlotte. I'm in Denver for Startup Week. Mike is in an undisclosed location in the Gulf of Mexico. And Jimmy is there in Veriton headquarters in Houston. So this is quite fun.
I'm holding down your fort for you.
We can't think of anybody better. There's been a change. Jimmy is now in charge of Veriton. Mike, before we jump in with Jimmy, what would you tell us about the markets or anything on the screen or in the news that you think is worth highlighting?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things worth highlighting. I mean, right now, I think the biggest issue affecting the market, and the market's down around 300 or 400 points today, and it's down for the week about anywhere from 3 to 5% went on, depending on what indice you look at. And the reason why is the Fed, obviously, they met on Thursday. They kept rates unchanged.
Wednesday, I guess.
Yeah, it was Wednesday. And what they did signal is that they probably would raise again. But the one thing that they said that really impacted the market, they said that they're going to keep rates higher for longer. And I think most people expect that they might be cutting early next year. And that seems like that's not going to be the case. And so you have the 10-year bond right now almost at 4.5%. It's up about 30 basis points over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and that's a pretty strong move. And so the markets were kind of brushing that aside, and right now it's impacting markets. So you have people basically fleeing equities. Bonds are getting crushed right now, and so that's the status of sort of the big macro play that's going on right now. I'd say from a crude oil standpoint, crude oil has held up pretty well. Intra-week, this week, we got it as high as $96, $97 on Brent, around $93, $94 on WTI. Right now, WTI is holding right around $90. And given all the stuff that's going on in the bond market and equity markets, I think that's pretty good. And the reason why we're holding in there well is the Saudis are being very, very vigilant. They're going to keep holding production where it's at, number one. Number two, crude oil inventory numbers are coming in really good. Cushing numbers are getting really, really low. We're around 22, 23 million barrels. We're probably going to draw another million or so this next week. And so we're starting to get to lower levels. And so that's really keeping markets physically tight, keeping the screen tight as well. And so that's what's going on in the crude oil markets. From an equity standpoint, we just talked about that, a lot of pressure on the equity market because of bonds. But 3 or 4 things that I see in the equity markets we're going to have to deal with. A, obviously interest rates, we just talked about that. B, crude oil is a $90 plus. It's going to create some inflationary issues in the next couple of months. The third thing is, this government shutdown keeps looming out there. We'll see if we have something happen on that front. Fourth, you see the UAW is still out there striking. I think, what are the repercussions of that going to be longer term? And I think the last thing, just from an equity standpoint, you've seen just like 2 really high profile, IPOs. That being ARM Holdings, which really went crazy when it came out there, was up 50, 60, 70%. And then you had, a day or two ago, Instacart came out. The point I'm going to make is those stocks did really, really well. Now they're trading below their IPO pricing range. And that's a really, really bad sign for equity markets. I think people were really excited that they were doing initially well. They're now at or below their offering price. And so that's a bad sign for the equity markets at this point in time. So all this is just kind of weighing on markets at this point in time. So that's what I'm thinking we need to think about next week and in following weeks.
Mike, also listening to you, when you blend together some of that news, it looks like cost of labor going forward, going up, cost of energy going forward, likely going up, cost of capital going forward, likely up. At least those 3 things are on the screen right now. And those usually aren't good for stocks, obviously.
And we didn't say anything about this, but it goes back to the point we've been talking about for a very long time. You've heard me say this energy transition is going to be inflationary. You're seeing it with the auto companies having to raise their wages. You're seeing UPS having to raise their wages. And what we also saw this week is the UK decide that, we're going to really kind of take a pause on our rollout of, EVs, having EV sales, you sort of mandatory ICE sales, basically going away in 2030. They've pushed that out to 2035. So I think there's some realism, creeping into the market. But you said it, Maynard. This is inflationary, and we have to worry about that. And that's what the markets are really concerned with.
Brett, I was with you Monday in New York. Climate Week was this week. We did some nuclear things. We're going to get into some great nuclear things with Jimmy. But anything you would throw into the hat from Climate Week, nuclear news or otherwise?
Well, I don't think there's really been a lot of big announcements. We were really at a really interesting event at the Atlantic Council was hosting next to Climate Week and the UN General Assembly meeting in New York earlier last week. The Emiratis Nuclear Energy Corporation was a huge sponsor around this event, and we heard a lot around sort of the dichotomy between the successes happening in the UAE, as well as sort of some of the challenges that we're looking at in terms of, bifurcations of markets, as well as looking at opportunities around deploying future nuclear technology. So I think a lot of what we even saw and we sat around and listened to on Monday. So a lot of the questions in the discussion that the groups that the commissioner is looking to work with and work on together around. And I think it all is very interesting that, numerous groups, the international groups adjacent to, New York City Climate Week, as well as, sort of a thoughtful working group within the Texas state government are all asking these similar questions.
No, it is. Nuclear is fascinating. That's just one of the reasons we're so excited to have you, Jimmy, with us. But there's a whole host of others. I mean, power is the topic in today's world. Everybody's watching it, thinking about it. Let me just say again, we're delighted to have you. It's a busy time for you. Not that it wasn't already, but tell us a little bit about what the governor's asked you to do and how you're thinking about the world right now.
Thanks, Maynard. So the governor was looking ahead, saying, how do we get this state primed to host nuclear power plants again? Obviously, we are one that we've got a competitive power market. We've got a lot of energy that we produce here in the state of all different kinds. But we also know that there are challenges. We've heard from other states. We've heard from companies that building a big capital cost project, maybe our market design isn't just right for that. And then we've got to help fill this void of workforce, supply chain, many of the things that have gone away over the last 20 years that we have here, but they haven't been focused on nuclear. So part of this is to wrap that up, develop a story about what we have and what is going for Texas, why we want to be the leader in this space, find the areas that we can make state changes to and address them in the next legislative session, and find the partnerships that are necessary to make real projects happen in this state. And those three things, I think, if we can be successful there, we're gonna leapfrog some of the other states. We know some of the other states, they have different structures. They have different plans in place, but we think we've got a lot going for us in Texas. And we think that with our high technology growth, the power quality needs of the semiconductor industry, the amazing expertise of the oil and gas sector and how they can build things in a modular way, we can learn a lot and we can be the center of this space. And that's what our goal is, to give the governor the roadmap for that.
And it's really interesting that as you think about it, the governor didn't say, hey, Jimmy, help me with reliable, reasonably priced, dependable power. It's not a broad, he said nuclear. Tell me how we do the nuclear flavor, which in a way that seems, it really, it pushes you to ask really specific, hard questions and to get real results. So I think he's kind of to be commended for zeroing in on that flavor.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, we've been trying to solve the dispatchable resource issue for the last 2 years. So what is the dispatchable resource of the future in Texas that we can pair with our wind? We can pair up with our wind and solar and batteries and have a strong electric power system for economic growth for decades to come. First and foremost on the governor's plate is we have to solve and ensure that these technologies are safe and secure for the communities that would actually adopt them. So we'll be looking at those, making sure that we have communities that are interested in having these resources and educate them on what that means to have a small reactor there. Obviously, we've got lots of different generations that have been that are in the workforce and that are around our state now since 3 Mile Island, and the thoughts about safety and security are different now. So we need to go find those. We need to go adopt those. We need to go make sure that this type of technology has a place in our future. And I think the primary reason here is because it's low carbon, which is not a huge seller in Texas, but it is for the world. And if we can become the supply chain corner for a lot of these components and labor, then we are benefiting ourselves and our power markets and our environment, and we are creating economic growth and development within our state. So it's really a multi-pronged story that if we're successful on this front end, it could really be economic development for decades.
And as I think about nuclear, I know, Brett, you'll get in here, but Governor Lee in Tennessee, I know has been an advocate. Governor Youngkin in Virginia. There's a few places where this is starting to come up. Are there others that come to mind, either Jimmy or Brett, where other states are leaning in and saying, how do we make nuclear in particular? How do we make ourselves more hospitable to nuclear development?
Well, so I looked at the NEI came out, the Nuclear Energy Institute came out with a report. They listed all of the states and all of the mechanisms that each state has done over the last maybe 15 years. Really, Virginia and Tennessee and Wyoming are the ones that I think are taking affirmative actions to solve, to position themselves. And they're very logical as to why. Virginia has a massive data center industry. So a firm 24/7 clean resource is something that could power them for the future. Tennessee, very unique with the Tennessee Valley Authority, longtime nuclear operator, has a built-in rate base that they can mitigate some risk or manage risk better than others. They're in 7 states. And Wyoming, I say Wyoming is, they passed a lot of bills primarily because they have to make themselves attractive because they don't have all the industry and they don't have all the load growth that these other regions have. So, and I think Texas, I think we have all of that. We've got the data centers. We've got so much to offer, as well as a can-do attitude at building big projects.
And Texas has I think one of the things that's unique about Texas is it's drawing so many industries from other states and really globally. One of the things that we talk about with the IRA, Jimmy, is it seems like the Texas Gulf Coast is going to become the global capital of kind of almost everything you can think of, and so almost that region alone would justify we've got to do something dramatic to add more reliable power.
Maynard, I think you're right. And what that gives us on the Gulf Coast are the ability to work with companies that understand how to build and execute on large projects. I think it's a great story that Dow and X-Energy are working. X-Energy on obviously the new technology, but Dow has been building mega projects for decades. They understand the discipline. They understand the process to get projects done on time, on budget, and how that affects their global market share. So pushing some of that discipline into this nuclear space, I think is really valuable. And as you said, along the Gulf Coast, we're going to have all of those technologies, whether they be industrial, oil and gas, LNG, CCS, hydrogen. I mean, it becomes the melting pot for why can't we do this, or we must do this along the Gulf Coast.
And I was thinking, Jimmy, we'll attach it to the podcast here, but the letter that the governor wrote where he says, I'm going to ask Jimmy to do this. It's, to me, you're a policy expert, but to me, it's kind of an interesting letter because he just says, hey, we got a job to do. And I'm going to ask one person, I'm going to ask this guy to help us get organized. So it's cool. And now you got a really big job. I mean, tell us a little bit about the history, the phone call, how did this come together that the governor asked you to do this?
Well, I think it's been a long time coming. This has been an issue that's been on his mind for a long time. And as he's had discussions with all different types of folks in the power business over the last 2 years since Winter Storm Uri, this has been something that he, as well as other Republicans, have said we need to adopt this type of a resource. And after looking into it, the question is really just sitting right there in front of us. Why isn't Texas the leader in this space? And, I think that he wants to not only make sure that our power system is reliable and clean in the future, but he wants to make sure that we have great resources for decades to come. So there are only a handful of those that can fit that niche, and this is one of them.
One of the things we've been struck by, Jimmy, as we've kind of roamed all the nuclear issues, on the political side, it is a flavor that seems to draw both sides. Perhaps sometimes for different reasons, as you mentioned. There's one group that it's really focused on climate. There's another group that's maybe focused on economic security or power reliability for whatever reason. But nuclear is just drawing more and more support from both sides of the aisles. At least it seems that way. Is that the way you perceive it?
That is the way I perceive it. And I do think they're for two different reasons. One of them is for national security. One of them is for energy security or climate security. And I think for whatever reason, you get both in this type of a resource. So if in fact that is what we get, then we need to work together to put the mechanisms in place to allow it to flourish.
Well, now let's jump to really, we were so excited to talk to you about this. This whole thing is fascinating. But also, we want to help you with this, and so helping you publicize what you're doing, how you're thinking. That's part of our agenda today. What next for people watching this who are curious about it or who want to share their thoughts with you? How's this going to work, kind of procedurally, so to speak?
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. So since we are a public agency, we're kind of a hybrid. We're trying to figure out how we operate, where we get as many people involved, but also do it totally in the open. In the course of the types of projects that the PUC traditionally does, we do them in rate bases, we do them in dockets. And rate cases, so that all of this is filed within a docket on the PUC website. We're doing the same thing. So we have a docket, and we are going to file everything within this docket at the PUC, and we're going to have a smart link on the main page of the PUC where it will take you straight to that docket, and you can see what is going on. We're going to have a meeting next Wednesday. I'm happy to say that we filed the document today to outline this meeting, and y'all are the first to know. So when this comes out on Monday, it will be on Thursday of next week, the day after our open meeting in the afternoon, and we're going to lay out the structure that we've come to an agreement on, and roll that out and let people pick at it. We don't have pride of authorship. What we want to have pride in is the final outcome. So, we want people to participate. And if we're putting in roadblocks for participation, then we have to change things. But we're going to have a kind of an organizational meeting next week. And then we're going to really, hopefully within 5 days or 7 days after that, we're going to announce who we have really on this working group. And the working group should not be there to just, we want 70 or 80 people working on this. This can't be the product of me and the PUC or just the working group. This has to be everybody bringing their views together so we can address them. So we're going to have a series of public meetings between October and April where we bring the major issues that we're going to try to address. So are there financial incentives that the state needs to consider? If they are, will they be able to be paired with federal resources that can help mitigate risk on these early projects? What is our market design? How do we get the oil and gas industry involved in this? And what do they need to adopt this technology? Same thing with high technology and semiconductors. So there's a whole host, supply chain and workforce. We will be going through all of those we're going to be giving folks that opportunity to speak, to come talk to us about this, to talk about solutions and problems. And then this docket, people are going to be able to file. Anybody who wants to can file very easily in this docket, or they can send it to me at the PUC, and we'll get it put in there, and they'll be part of the process.
And Jimmy, this is obviously a Texas launch, Texas sponsored. It's all about the future of Texas. But to comment, I think I understand. If you have a business here, you might have a business here. You just have something to share. Like, you don't have to be a citizen of Texas to make a comment here. Is that right?
Not at all. We are going to be focused on what laws, rules, structures we need to change in Texas or modify in Texas to make this the great place to build these reactors. But we don't know everything. Most of these reactor companies are not even based in Texas. So getting them here, telling us what they're seeing around the world, having other folks tell us what they're seeing and what they think might be successful is critically important for us to look at the whole universe of ideas, the whole universe of problems, and then come to solutions.
This is, it's nuclear, but as I understand how you're thinking, it's not necessarily a certain size nuclear or a certain, approach or technology, because nuclear does have a number of different flavors right now. How do you think about that aspect of this? There's micro SMRs, there's the big units, the traditional units.
I think what we're really thinking of is SMRs and micro reactors. So we don't believe that Texas ratepayers will pay for a Vogtle type plant, So as this industry is maturing and looking down the road, that's what we want to capture. That's what we've heard the industry wants to capture as well. So if oil and gas industry is looking at micro reactors, if NASA is looking at micro reactors, if the high tech industry is looking at SMRs, how do we take what they need and make sure that our policies are not impeding the success of those efforts?
Jimmy, thanks for being on the show. It's pretty enlightening already. But one of the things I want to talk about is that even if we go the SMR and micro reactors and stuff of that nature, we're talking minimum 7 to 8, maybe even years or longer. And I think when people look at the state, what's gone on just this year with really being on the brink of on the power break. Right. What are we thinking about the next? Sometimes a really great plan, looking at sort of the next 8-10 years is great. It all looks fantastic, and it gets derailed because of what's going on right now. How are we going to be thinking about sort of the wedge between now and when those technologies are available, say 2035, 2037?
Totally a great question. Don't have all the answers, but what my crystal ball says is we've got to have ERCOT involved because they're going to be around for a long time. So having them help us look at market design and look at transmission system is critically important for whatever we get in the end. In the short term, we're having obviously what the technology that's proliferating. I think the quickest that it's similar is batteries. We don't know how batteries in an aggregate 10,000 megawatts are going to operate around our system. We're trying to learn that. But what we do have is an aging fleet. So while we're going to be filling in some of these early retirements with batteries and some of the peaks and valleys between solar and wind with batteries, we do know that whether it be EPA regulations or just the costs of some of these older plants is going to keep them uneconomic. So out of an 80,000 megawatt system, probably rising to 100 and 120,000 megawatts by 2035, we are going to have to fill in that gap with new technology. So I feel confident that we're not just wasting our time now for a technology in 2035. There will be a place in our market for this type of technology.
Jimmy, can I just tack on to that? Because I think where Mike is going, I agree, it's a great question. You might, to accommodate nuclear, I mean, who knows? You're open for comment here. You might, to make nuclear work, decide that we need to make some other changes, to the broader market. I'm not presupposing that's the case, but it won't just be kind of in a silo. It'll be in the context of all of Texas's power.
It will be, but I do think there is something different between a wind, solar, and storage resource and something that is a much higher capital cost early in the development process, that if the state makes the decision that we want them to be a part of our resource mix, they're willing to make a market design modification. Don't know what that is yet, but to accomplish that, because it's a bigger goal than just lower power prices in a competitive market. There's a lot of economic development and stability, global stability to go with that.
One more last point as well, too, Jimmy, is a lot of developers, we talk to, and in some of these talks that we have, it seems like everyone wants to talk about the generation part, but no one wants to talk about the backbone, the transmission part. And I think that has to go hand in hand. And that really is, it's not back to the day where you had 1,000 or 1,500 megawatt system coming on. You have 30 here, 50 here, 100 here, all these different things. And that's not easy to bring all this stuff on board. And so transmission has to be, forefront of that, maybe even in front of that. How do you guys think about that?
Well, transmission is kind of my bailiwick. I'm an old transmission developer, and I believe that first and foremost, we need to be better stewards of our rights of way. So that means that we need to take our existing rights of way and get more out of them, whether that's with technology, higher capacity conductors, using HVDC technology. We have to find a way to move more power around the system. We've been working with ERCOT. We hope that in the next few months they will lay out a process to be studying a grid overlay that's higher capacity, that would allow more power to move around the system and thus allow different regions to access lower cost power at any different time. So clearly transmission congestion has been a costly problem. We'll never eliminate it, but I think getting higher capacity lines, higher voltage lines, better use of our rights of way, that's what we need to be doing. That's what they do in the gas business. They don't dig up a pipeline and put a whole new pipe in there. For the most part, if you can upgrade your compressors, you do that. So how do we do that in the power space? We need to learn from them.
Commissioner, I think this is, such an awesome, endeavor and really cool discussion. But, a lot of times when we start talking or folks start talking about nuclear and deployment around nuclear, a lot of the role or a lot of the entity that people talk to or focus more on is sort of the federal government's role rather than sort of the state government's role. And, maybe we might all disagree and might, think that this is an opportunity for, commercial enterprises and state governments. But I think that you still probably recognize that there's a huge, discussion point around the role of the federal government and how the federal government supports even, aims within the state of Texas. Could you maybe elaborate on what you might envision around how the working group might interact or think around engagement around the federal government, whether it's the Department of Energy or the national labs or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or something maybe that we're not thinking about?
Oh, great question. I think it's fair to say that in these first rounds of reactors that are going to get built, of these SMRs, none of them are going to get built without federal government involvement and support, financial support. So we are not going to go at it alone. We are going to figure out what we can do and how we can pair that with what the federal government can do. We are not going to do the waste issue, and we're not going to do the fuel issue here. Those we think are on their way to, they're in the federal government realm, and a state really can't do anything about them. But when it comes to incentives, when it comes to how we get permitting done quickly, how we get how we get accepted as a state that really wants to have these reactors, that's what we got to do. So it's positioning. And when we talk to the Department of Energy and we talk to the nuclear office there, we talk to the loan programs office, what we're trying to package for them is a commitment from our state that we want to build these resources. And 5 years into this endeavor, we're not going to stop it and go away, and they're going to have to trade horses for another state. That we are going to be in this, and we're going to be in it for the long run, and we're going to build these things here in this state. So if we can package that, they can accept it, and they can be on board with us as a partner, and we're going to be successful.
And Jimmy, just to clarify for everyone, when you said, because I think this is an awesome perspective and an awesome way to think about working with the federal government and the role for states to kind of, be an engine for change around this discussion. When you were mentioning the fuel issue, you were really specifically talking about, uranium and enrichment and conversion and stuff like that. Folks and the supply chain side of like things that we already do in the United States around fuel and manufacturing and things. Those are things that you're still interested in talking about and seeing more around. Just more so this larger sort of international challenge around the enrichment, uranium, and conversion discussion, right?
Yeah, I think it would be hard for the state of Texas to say we're going to solve the enrichment issue for the United States or for just Texas. So we have to be involved in that, and we will be involved in that. So will the companies that are here, but from a different perspective. We don't have state laws that talk about uranium enrichment. So is that something that we can modify? No. We want to make this not only a power effort, we want this to be an economic development. We want the supply chain here. And I think there is a great, we have a great asset in our oil and gas supply chain already that does many of the exact same things that are needed in this nuclear space. So if we can get federal dollars to help them retool or to train them to do new things or to get certified by the NRC or other entities in order to produce nuclear parts, that's where we want to go. So they will be primed for success into this industry going forward.
So Jimmy, one question I had, I think this was all rolled out, kind of roughly August 20th is when this was announced. So it hasn't been much time at all. But that was a heck of an announcement. I'm assuming you heard from a lot of people, got a lot of feedback, got a lot of phone calls. Is there anything you'd say about sort of the feedback or commentary or just whatever you've heard since the governor made this announcement?
Well, I think I've heard. So I will say that if I had 100 discussions with people, 99 have been positive and only one has not. And I knew that one was not because the person I asked, I've known him in Austin for a long time, and he was been anti-nuclear for 30 years. So he wasn't going to change his tune now, but we still need to ask those people why they think that, and they have a voice as well. Listen, I think that we've got a great market and a great place to build these types of reactors and to be a global leader in this space. There are a lot of reactor companies that are looking for homes. They want to be in a state where the state is supportive of their efforts and will help them be successful. I think we have a great track record of doing that, and we will do that in this space.
Maybe I could ask you, because I alluded to it in the beginning. You you did some work with Spencer Abraham at DOE. You worked for George Bush, thinking about energy policy when he was governor. And then you've had many, many roles in industry. You've seen the ebbs, the flows, what's hot, what's not. How do you think the current environment compares to some of those previous environments? Like power is the topic of the day. We're all worried about prices and reliability. And of course, there's an overarching environmental and national security agenda. But just how you've seen it all. And I guess I'm wondering how you think about the current world compared to the many different versions of the world you've seen.
Well, I think what we saw in the 2000s with the proliferation of electric markets is we saw economics really take hold. So you had new combined cycle plants, combustion turbines drive out the old steam boilers and the old coal plants. And that's what happened in the market. So we saw the old one, inefficient plants be replaced. I think we've gotten away from economics as we've had more intrusion from the tax code, and that has skewed the market. But we can't let it skew the market forever because we still have to have reliable power. So we're seeing tax credits, whether they be for hydrogen or for renewable energy, create markets. And I fear that they're creating markets that aren't sustainable forever. So I just think we need to be careful with that. We need to keep our eye on that. But we've seen a lot, and this is not the first transition that we've seen in energy. We'll see more to come, I think. Ultimately, we may get to everybody having a microreactor at their house next to their air conditioner. Who knows? But that may be the goal in the next 100 years.
One other question. So, you're obviously on the Public Utility Commission. The PUC is talking about all kinds of issues. To Mike's point, we're not really through the summer yet, but we're largely through it, and we've had some close calls on terms of power and such. What would you tell us just more broadly about the PUC, what you guys are talking about, what's happening, what's on your radar? Just any perspective from there would be welcome.
So we're really trying to understand where we are. The legislature left, obviously, in May, and they passed a number of bills. We're trying to piece together what the Public Utility Commission had already done, what the legislature has directed us to do, and fill in the gaps where we have problems. The gaps will be filled, I think, in the short term by demand response. So really getting the demand, the citizens of the state involved. What we have right now is a program called ERS. That's a demand response program for industrials. And then we have ERCOT. At many times, everybody knew that we had calls for conservation. Well, they're really the same thing, except for when we call conservation, when we make conservation calls to the general public, they're free. But when we give them to industrials in a program, we pay them for that. So figuring out how we make that mechanism available to general citizens who want to reduce their demand during important times and get paid for it, and how you aggregate that will be a very valuable piece as we go forward. We've got transmission, we've got distribution things that we're working on. We're understanding how to work with ERCOT and operate the system with more batteries and intermittent renewables on the system. It is a transition, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say the operators are doing a really good job. They are the ones who have to sit and watch these days. My palms get sweaty. Theirs must be, really, really sweaty on some of those days. Let me just say one more thing on that. We've made it for the most part through summer. Summer has historically been the challenging time in Texas, but as we go forward in the wintertime, we are seeing another challenge, and that is the amount of solar we have on our system. We have shorter days. In the summertime, that solar is operating until 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. In the wintertime, it's operating till 5 in the afternoon. So we have to make sure that the demand and the supply are equal during those winter evenings when people leave work and go home and the sun has already gone down.
So, Jimmy, just a math question. If we pay an industry to turn off when we really are short power, does that payment ultimately show up in a residential bill, so to speak? Like who pays that tab? How do we? I know that's a little bit.
It does. It does. There are a few programs that ERCOT manages that are uplifted, as it's called, to all consumers across the state, and those fees are paid for by everybody. So if we reduce the cost or we reduce reliability, because of those payments, sometimes I don't know what the calculus is. If it's a net even, it's a net wash. But they do get uplifted to consumers, and they're good programs because they're needed. When we get tight on power and the industrials can reduce 1,200 megawatts in an afternoon, it's very valuable. It's valuable to the entire system. But they're not the only ones that can provide that service. So we're hoping that businesses, commercial industries, and consumers can get into that business as well.
So, Jimmy, maybe just a personal question. This is going to be a ton of work. It's going to be very stimulating. But wow, what a bunch of work! And you're going to be leading and hearing from so many opinions. What drew you to this just professionally? And why did you get excited about doing this? Why did you say yes to the governor?
Well, listen, I didn't have a job at the time. I had started a antique business. And I had worked on a project to help rebuild the power system in Puerto Rico. And then I left. And this happened. I had 5 days without heat. And I thought my friends who worked in the governor's office, they knew that I'd been in the power business and worked at the Department of Energy and had built power plants, that if I could provide some help during that tough time, that I was willing to do so. I've been in and out of government, so providing that service, I enjoy that, and it was the right time, and the governor selected me, and I'm honored that he did.
Well, and that was the PUC, and then you got this special mission on nuclear, which is going to be one. It's just a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
It's in addition to everything that we have going on at the PUC, and but we're going to get it done. We know what we have to do. We've got an industry that's supportive of us. We've got a Public Utility Commission staff that's supportive of us, and we're going to come up with a good report and have a really good roadmap that I think other states are going to wish they had.
Yeah, Jimmy. One of the things we always ask our participants here, our guests, is like, what is the world going to look like in the next 10 years? And the reason I ask that is if you look at Texas growth over the last 15 years, it's been pretty phenomenal. But when I look at the growth from an industrial standpoint, from a population standpoint, people moving from other states, I think the next 10 or 15 years is going to be probably a little bit more growth there than it has been. How do you guys think about that? What does the next 10 years look like for you? If we did something in the next 10 years, what would you say would be an accomplishment?
Well, I think obviously I would say with this nuclear that we have plants either on the ground operating or under construction here within the next 10 years, and that we have a development pipeline of multiple plants that will be sited here to help with that load growth. I think we need in the transmission space, I think we need to have more transmission lines at higher voltages. So if we had a plan or under construction, a higher voltage network of transmission lines around the state, I think we would be in much better shape. And then on the distribution systems, we're going to have to upgrade a lot of little devices so that folks with electric vehicles can sell that energy that is stored in that battery back to the grid. And if we have those mechanisms in place, then what we're doing is we're helping the supply side, we're helping the transmission side, and then we're helping the demand side. And all of those three things together will work for a more economic and reliable system.
Well, Jimmy, as we wrap up, I just have a couple of thoughts. One, thank you. I mean, it's exciting that we have people with your background and vision and determination leaning in, trying to help on issues like this. The second one was, since this is, we really want to be helpful to you, maybe we just, as we wrap, go back to the exact details on what people need to know if they're interested and they want to reach out, want to share an opinion. Let me give you the final word here.
Great. Well, thank you. So I want to say that we're going to have our first public workshop for the Advanced Nuclear Working Group Thursday, September 28th at 2 p.m. Central Time in Austin at the Public Utility Commission. That's 1701 North Congress. Everybody is welcome. It will also air on if you go to the Texas Public Utility Commission website, there will be a link for you to see it online as well. Also, keep in touch with us either through my office, where you can find my email on the website, or there will be a link to our Advanced Nuclear Working Group on the main page of the Public Utility website. It's under development right now, but in the next couple of days, I expect it to be available. And there you can find everything that's going on, all the meetings that we're going to have, provide opportunities for input and discussion.
Well, we're really excited about it too. I think we, Brad, of course, is our nuclear lead, but the rest of us keep thinking the world could use a Hyman Rickover type. And it seems like in Jimmy Glotfelty, we just found one. So, wow. So glad you're doing this.
That's a high bar, but we're going to get the policy right so that these types of reactors can be built in our state.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, everybody. And please tune in.